Okay, I will call the meeting back to order at 1:05. Next item on our agenda is item 6.1, minimum tax impacts, which is on page 43 of your agenda package. Recall.
I would like to compliment administration on the report and be prepared to move the recommended motion.
Move the recommended motion. Any comments on this item? Councillor Cromwell.
Thank you. And I know we've been around minimum tax many a time, and we're going to go around it again. I think that the minimum tax is not the right way of doing it. We are impacting a small percentage of our tax roll and getting very little revenue out of it. I think we would be far better off to abolish the minimum tax and implement a administration fee per tax notice that comes out at $25 and make it uniform across the board.
Further comments? Councillor Holland?
Thank you. The instituting an administration fee across the board, of course, would definitely make it fair for everyone. It would also triple the revenue, if not a little more, for that purpose of bringing in revenue. I agree that the minimum tax, we have discussed it. I still maintain that it is not fair and equitable. We've got properties that are not serviceable. They're not accessible. We didn't take that into account, nor did we know that at this time, that we passed this, that it went through, that we didn't realize the impact. One resident to have his taxes increased by over $1,000 in 1 year is insane to me. Someone who's been doing cattle for many years and not had to have that burden, especially in retirement age, is just, for me, it just doesn't make sense. We also approve variances to our structures of under 640 square feet, which impacts our tax assessments as well, which is, cause it, somebody who's got a 640 square foot less size home is has to use the same services as somebody with a 4,000 square foot home. So I really struggle with the minimum tax. We have assessments. That's our way of dealing with what land is worth. And to turn around and tell someone that their 2-acre parcel that's not accessible by land and not accessible for any services for that matter is going to be taxed at the same minimum as somebody with 160-acre unaccessible property makes zero sense. It's extremely unfair to me. So if we are unable to come to an administrative type fee, I would be definitely in support of lowering the minimum tax if that is the desire of the council. But I would prefer to see it disappear all entirely, and we look at our mill rates as what we should be doing as far as the council is concerned.
Councillor Garlick.
As a county, the county supplies a vast array of services to its citizens. And that has to be paid for in some manner. There has to be revenue raised from somewhere. And that is raised in the form of taxes, which then you have to develop a system as to how do you implement taxes so that they're implemented fairly right across the board. So you have assessment. Everything is assessed on a formula that is consistent throughout the province. And so you have this assessment, and that's when I see the mention of to create fairness, that's what assessment is all about. It's there to create fairness. So why would you then all of a sudden pick out a certain portion, which happens to be 0.3%, 0.3% out of our tax base, not even a percent. It's hardly worth even looking at, as minuscule. At the same time, we had the blinders on because we're going to implement this minimum tax because it's going to build bridges and it's going to do all these things for us. And it happens that that's 0.3% of our income. 75% or more comes from linear and machinery and equipment and those taxes. And we didn't even bother with it. So when a pipeline comes out of Lac La Biche into the county of Athabasca, they get a 25% discount because our mill rate is 25% below what Lac La Biche is. And then you go into Thorhild and it goes up 80%. And we're 4 to 5 mills behind Lac La Biche, even though they have double the assessment we do. And one mill's worth $1 million. So we just closed our eyes to assessing those that are really not paying their fair share in comparison. If we were going to the maximum the government allows, a 5-to-1 ratio on your lowest mill rate to the industrial rate, we could be sitting at 21 mills and still be within provincial guidelines. And we're at 13, 14. And we've inflicted this on taxpayers for no good reason. There's absolutely nothing fair about it. If you have a quarter section that's got 5 or 7 acres split off it, and most of it is because of topography. You get in my neck of the woods, and hardly any of the roads follow a road allowance. They're following the topography. And there's a piece of wasteland on this side. And during the 60s and 70s, everybody farmed or used every inch of land. If there was cultivated land, they were using it for livestock and raising grain and whatever. And they fenced all these little pieces of bush and whatever to run their cattle in. And you can't supply a water source and fence these things. So all these little pieces got utilized. And that's all changed now. Those pieces are there and they're probably hardly even used anymore. But now we're going to charge the same amount of tax on the 7 acres as the balance of the quarter pays. They both probably pay $100 on some of that marginal land. Doesn't make sense, and it's not fair. There's nothing fair about it. If we'd have just implemented an administration charge, that would answer. And again, the $30, I don't believe it costs any $30. I mean, you take the number that we have in the tax roll and just divide it by 30. If we amalgamated 1,000 of those properties back together, it's not going to drop by $30. It just doesn't cost that. It does if you take the whole thing and divide it by the number on the tax roll. But if you took 2,000 or 3,000 off of that and divided it, it would just be more expensive per unit. It'd probably be $30, $40. I'm so frustrated that I promised myself I wouldn't get too excited about this and be able to explain it better. But I think it was a bad idea then. And I think it is a costly thing that we missed $1 million in 2021 that we should have picked up. We missed that again. It's magnified in 22 and it's magnified in 23 and 24. That $1 million that we should have taken that first year while we were fooling around with this this trivial thing that affected a lot of our ratepayers. It's really shameful almost. We came in as a new council with no experience at all, with an administration that had no experience at all, and we tackled something like that. And it does not show well.
Councillor Mins, do you have your hands up?
Well, I'm not going to comment too much. It looks like we're not the only one that actually implemented a minimum tax, because we have information here that shows just a few of the municipalities that have minimum tax, and a few of them are already raising it up from what they actually started with. So I don't believe that we did anything wrong. I think my point of view is a administration fee is about the worst thing we could do, just due to the fact that I've watched my taxes just on my own land on my own house go up by $200-300 in the last few years. And it's like, why all of a sudden are we gonna start making people who are paying $4,000 in just a subdivision lot pay another $25 just to get their tax notice? No. That, to me, that's ludicrous. But to say that we're doing people wrong by having a minimum tax, I don't agree with, and I'll vote the same way that I voted before. It's as you can see, we're not the only municipality doing this. So I don't think $100 for owning any land or leasing any land is ridiculous. I don't think so.
Counselor Wallach.
Yeah, I'd be opposed to an administration fee, just the town has done it and the people there are pissed. They don't like it. So, and the administration has no, from what I've heard, when people call the office, they have no excuse why they're charging their $25, their administration fee. So I would not want that administration fee.
When I look at this list, we, when we had the discussion around the minimum tax, we said we were gonna set it and it was hopefully gonna stay there. We were gonna leave it at the same rate. We weren't gonna increase it. We were committing to not increasing it. And then I look at these other municipalities that have had to increase theirs, and I just think, I'm glad we haven't. I'm glad that we set it at a value we thought was fair, and we're not having to increase it here. And so I'm in favor of leaving it as is. Go around one more time, Counselor Grilic.
Somehow I don't understand why people are apologetic for taxes. Our taxes right across the board are extremely low. For housing, for farmland, they're extremely low. Compare it to how much you pay for a power pole in your yard, what you pay in taxes and what you get from the municipality. And the mere fact is that we're very fortunate that we have industry in here that picks up the bulk of the cost. What we pay in property taxes for houses and whatever is very, very minimal. And I don't know why people should apologize for tax increases. Everybody has a job and they say, well, inflation is such and such. I need 3% or whatever to cover the cost of inflation. Well, a municipality, they don't have any 100% of what they spend are fixed costs. They're not discretionary spending. It's fixed costs. And I don't know why all of a sudden we feel like we should be somehow guilty about raising taxes or charging taxes or whatever. That's where the county gets their income from. And we've left so much untouched. Like, you explain to me why you would want to milk these few pennies out of our taxpayers, and we don't address our shortfalls on 75% of our income with the industrial sector. I mean, Lac La Biche has twice the assessment we do. They're 5 mills ahead of us on that. They got half the roads we do. They've got 40 major structures. We got 240 as far as bridges and bridge pipes are concerned. And we're sitting here and we're raising $108,000 by doubling taxes on these properties. It makes absolutely no sense. And I don't see where it costs the county. It doesn't cost them a penny more for anything other than sending out the tax notice. And I did inquire and I asked what would happen. I've got a couple of quarters that are split into 280s. I said, how much would you save if I amalgamate back together? And they said the price of a piece of paper. So it was a bad idea
Counselor
then.
Grilic, I'll get you to sit up closer to your microphone. Thank you.
It was a bad idea then, and it's a bad idea now. And I think that we should recognize it. And I think that we should be sitting down and having some discussions around taxation, because taxation is our income. And we're just kind of sitting back and really not, like, when we went through this, I asked our CAO, I said, are we comparable with our with our neighboring jurisdictions as far as M&E and linear. Yep, we're very comparable. And I was brand new then and didn't know exactly how to run my computer. If I wouldn't have been so ignorant, I probably could have looked some of that stuff up for myself, because when I finally did figure it out, I saw that it was sorely lacking. And you need to remember that we also passed 2 readings of the bylaw, which called for a $250 minimum tax, which would have involved 6,000 properties, which would be half of the tax base. We're going to say an assessment doesn't matter anymore. This is a good idea. It was a bad idea, and I think everybody was relieved to get it from 250 to 100. Not that it was a good idea or an acceptable thing. It was just a heck of a lot better than 250.
Counselor Holland and then Counselor Cromwell? No? Okay.
Thank
Counselor
you.
Holland.
I said it earlier today, and I'll say it again. We are here to be the voice of the people. We work for the people. I have not had one person come to me and say, could you please put in a minimum tax? I think that would be great. I hear more people telling me, are you crazy? Are you serious? Is that really something that you guys want to go down as your legacy? Really? Minimum tax, 2,165 people impacted, 10,913 rolls. I'm sitting back going, is that fair? Why are we, once again, going after people that are using land that's really not, they weren't assessed to have land that was above the minimum tax because the land is useless to them other than pasture. And we're telling them, no, we're going to sidestep the assessment. We're going to sidestep that altogether because that process doesn't cut it for us. For 2,165 people, we failed them. And I think that is a travesty. And I think that's absolutely horrific that we are negatively impacting that many people over $108,640.81. Blows my brain. 0.3% of our budget. Unbelievable. We can do better than that. And I urge this council to think about that. We can do better. We work for the people. We don't work for this council.
Are there any further comments? Seeing none, I'll give Reeve Hall the final word before I call the question.
It seems the theme of the meeting is actually revisiting motions that were approved by a majority of council, but not liked by a few others and that keep coming back. Minimum tax actually is part of the equitable distribution of the tax burden across properties. Is it fair for a parcel worth $300,000 in one tax classification at market value to be taxed at $67 and another one in a different classification to be taxed at $2,300? We keep hearing this fairness. That doesn't work. Yet that is the reality of how the system works. And the minimum tax partly writes that. We can't get programs to be 100%. I think you've heard me say this before, 100% perfect for everybody all the time. There are absolutely going to be some things where there is an adverse impact, but I think our job is to make courageous decisions that are for the long term and that strive to get it right for the balance and the majority. And we have to accept that once in a while there will be an adverse impact. Assessment is not to create fairness, but to work out the equitable distribution of the tax revenue across our ratepayers and property within our boundaries. If you own a property, surely it's worth $100. If it's worth owning, is it not worth $100 to own it? This council has been steadily increasing the gap between our lowest and our highest rates. We've heard that we've done nothing, but that isn't the case. We set out a multi-year plan and we had the courage to say we are going to revisit the structure of our tax rates within our municipality. And we have been moving that gap so that our industrial, non-residential rates are getting higher and closer to the competitors on the in our neighboring jurisdictions. On one hand, I've heard this is insignificant, and yet we seem to spend an outrageous amount of time on this issue. I had a conversation with one of our largest landowners in the county, and they told me they felt this was reasonable. Like, this is probably, as individuals go, one of the people that have the highest personal tax bills. The argument about fairness to me doesn't hold water because we were comparing apples and peanuts. Much of the land that we're talking about is on the regulated assessment, and if it were taxed based on market value, few, if any of those would be worth $100. We're getting conflicting comments about how our taxes are too low, but then $100 per parcel is too high. We're talking about $100 a parcel on hundreds of millions of dollars worth of land. Taxation is spread across the land, generally by market value. There are some exceptions around regulated rate. This addresses that a little bit. And I'm going to say again, colleagues, it's time we started looking at new decisions and future focused things and move forward instead of looking through the rearview mirror. Can we let this rest?
Grieve Hall's made a motion to receive the minimum tax impact administrative report for information. If not, we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The count is 6 and 3.
Chair, I would also like to make note that motion is not valid, and committee of the whole being, you have to send that to council for recommendation.
Noted. Moving on to item 6.2, policy 2009, elected officials remuneration and expenses. At our last committee of the whole meeting, we discussed the elected officials remuneration and expenses policy. Administration has provided a clean copy of the amendments starting on page 61 of your agenda package. Councillor Holland.
Thank you. I noticed in the recommendation that it could be split, being that take effect date on November 30th. So I would like to go forward. Actually, I'll put a motion in and then we can speak on that. But I would like to recommend to County Council to forward policy 2009, elected officials remuneration and expenses to the upcoming regular County Council meeting for approval with amendments as discussed today. And the second motion be, and further that the second motion would be that this recommend to County Council that policy 2009 take effect October 1st.
Yep. Comments, questions? Did you have proposed amendments, Councillor Holland?
I do, thank you.
Can we start on page 61?
Actually, if we can move to page 65,
Okay.
that's where I was looking at making a few amendments. So the first amendment would be D and letter I, the last sentence, notwithstanding the foregoing, the Reeve and Deputy Reeve shall receive a travel per diem at a rate identified in section A. As we are doing away with per diems, I would like to see that statement removed. On page 67, let me see, G, I. This might be a little bit confusing, but I'll try my best. In the event that a member of council attends an event that is hosted by a provincial or federal political party, such as a provincial fundraising function, I would like to delete the words, the elected officials shall not be paid a per diem by the county for their attendance, as we do not have per diems. I would like to leave the comma in after that bracket of function bracket comma and go on with expenses that are deemed to not be political. Remove the comma. Contribution shall be reimbursed as a meal expense only up to a maximum of $25, etc. So I'll read how I would like that to read in my opinion.
Did that make sense to everybody? How she went through that? It made sense to me. And
No need to read it.
Recall? Sorry.
That's fine as two sentences. No, just put a period in and delete the comma.
So I'll just read it how I thought about it. In the event that a member of council attends an event that is hosted by a provincial or federal political party, such as a provincial fundraising function, expenses that are deemed to not be political contributions shall be reimbursed as a meal expense only, and then carry on with the rest of the sentence. So yeah, that comma
Anybody
between
have any
political,
opposition to that amendment? Yeah, this time?
thank you. So very important, the comma between political and contributions be removed. And the last one that I have, and this also is based on a couple of reasons that I would like to see on remuneration review, III. Any resulting recommendations, if approved by council, would be effective as of the beginning of the subsequent council term. I would like to see that removed. I know it's caused us some issues here, but I also note that when there is a midterm review, the sitting council should have that opportunity to be able to implement those recommendations as they see fit. And I also found that there was a bit of a contradiction in Schedule A, leaving that statement in as honorariums on page 68, which I'd like to see stay. Honorariums for the Reeve and councillors may be adjusted annually through the budget process to reflect current economic conditions. So recommendations and economic conditions, et cetera, should be able to be implemented during that review that has been requested midterm.
Discussion on that amendment? I would say I'm opposed to removing the clause about the remuneration review. I think a lot of what we've gone round and round about at this table would have been much different conversation if we were simply discussing setting things up for the next council instead of changing our own pay. So for that reason, I would be in opposition to that amendment. Any further discussion or any further amendments?
Can we,
propose?
so there's amendments proposed, but I think it's important to talk about them individually and get a poll of council. We can't have one councillor say, I want this out, and then let's talk about them individually and vote on them as we go, because I just think it's just better to get to a final document that we're all really clear we agree on.
Are there any other proposed amendments before we go through and review the proposed amendments? Councilor Holland.
Well, if we would like to open up the first one, then on page 65, the notwithstanding the foregoing statement. The reason why I've asked for that to be deleted is we have a county vehicle that is available for both the deputy reeve and the reeve to use, as well as councillors. And one of that is a benefit. Most people pay a taxable benefit on that as an employee. And we don't even see those that usage being put down, being included in our council expenses on the website. So I really struggle that we're not being open and transparent on the use of that vehicle, as well as we are removing per diems, or that is our hope to remove per diems. Therefore, I do not believe that a travel per diem is required.
I would support the removal of the travel per diem, so long as the policy is amended so that the reeve and deputy reeve can claim mileage for agenda reviews, check signings, document signings, and expense claim authorization, items like that. Because I know on multiple occasions, those are extra trips made to the office, and that's kind of what we had originally discussed, having those just token amounts for, was to cover all of those kind of expenses rather than having them be claimable. So it kind of has to, I would support one way or the other, but Councillor Wallach. Councillor Cromwell.
No, as you can see, that is very well, and I think that's very appropriate how you worded that.
Has to be one way
Yep.
or the other, right?
I was just gonna, what do you want added in there again?
The policy would have to be reworded so that the reeve, I would like to see it, so the reeve and deputy reeve should be permitted to claim mileage for agenda reviews, check signings, document signings, and expense claim authorizations. And other,
Or another, like, there's those other things that a person attends regardless of who's in the chair, that per diem kind of cover just a lot of the extra travel, and to me, it's just simpler to have a flat rate that is taxable, but is there, so I think having to track every last mileage related trip is onerous, but for the folks who are farther away from the office, it may be it'll certainly be more expensive, but it's probably a better option to just pay mileage for every one of those special trips that gets made on behalf of the county.
Sorry, Councillor Cromwell.
Thank you. Seeing as I don't think there's any objection to the wording that you used, could we ask through the chair to the recording secretary just to word kind of how she has that laid out to make sure we're.
Don't think she would have that laid out,
Okay.
being as it wasn't included in the original motion. The original motion is just as amended, so. Other amendments I would like to propose. Under 5.1E. Says submit their expense claims to the Council of Corporate Signing Authorities for authorization. I'd like that to say within 60 days of month end. Within 60 days of the month end, so. I mean, if you do your expense claim and you forget a couple things, you can add them in the next month, but I mean, there's only a certain time frame that you can add things in. Six point two C, I question the use of the word employee services for payroll. 6.2C on page 63. Elected officials are to provide sufficient information to employee services, payroll, and sign up for eligible benefits. We just use county administration in so many other places that it seemed inconsistent. So just change it to county administration. Or to administration, whether it's county administration or benefits administration.
Are we not able to just do payroll? Because, pardon?
Payroll.
Who's payroll? We give it to the administrative team. You can call them payroll, you can call them HR, you can call them late for dinner. We're giving it to administration.
Well, I guess way I look at it, when you're filling out T1s, I think, what are they now? Whatever they are, those our little information that were supposed to be for taxes, right? Whether we're single or married. I can't, T1s, yeah. TD1, that is, it's been that many years. When we're providing that information and signing up for eligible benefits, it shouldn't just go to any member of the administration team. It is a privacy thing. And for me, that should go to the payroll representative on staff, not everywhere else. When I send in information, it comes from my personal email, not my county email. So yeah, leaving it open just allows sensitive and private information to go places where it doesn't need to.
And I believe leaving it open opens the door to counselors discussing things with administration outside of going through the CAO, so.
How does it work for payroll? In this situation, is that not a good idea? Do we provide it to you or do we provide it to payroll?
Madam Chair, if you just refer to administration, it would be clear where it has to come.
Page 64, D, Roman numeral 5, V. Oh, 65, sorry. They've given me 2 copies of the agenda page and their page numbers are different. D5, yes. Where transportation is provided, for example, as part of a convention registration, it is expected that elected officials will make use of the complimentary transportation services. I would put comma when practical. If Councillor Minns is having a discussion with Brian Jean or Councillor Cromwell, I don't expect you to run out of that conversation to catch the community bus that's taking things for the conference, right? Like in that instance, a taxi or an Uber would be an acceptable mode of transportation just because of the timing. So I think that when practical
Well, and that
is really important for that.
that opens us up for meetings at the Ledge or anywhere as well, where there's not venue transportation to that outside venue. So you have to have,
You have to have that kind of clause. Are there any other amendments? Suggestions? Give everybody a chance to look through. Councilor Holland.
With the change to the per diem Schedule A of the travel per diem to change it to mileage for Reeve and Deputy Reeve, Schedule A then would need an update as well under travel. And I'm sorry, where were we at with the last amendment there on page 67, I, number 3, or I, the resulting recommendations effective at the beginning of the subsequent council term. I didn't hear if that was something that is page 67.
Do we want to take an informal poll on that one as to whether or not to include it? Or would somebody like to? Oh, what's the best way to do it so that it's recorded? Somebody like to make an amendment to
Just,
include it or not?
I didn't even object to just an informal poll first, and then if it's
Anybody okay with that? And then if it's divided, then we can do a formal poll so that it's on the record. Okay. Who is in favor of removing? What number is this? 6.3 Roman numeral 3, that council shall request a third-party review of elected official remuneration be undertaken to bring forward recommendations regarding council remuneration, and resulting recommendations, if approved by council, would be effective as of the beginning of the subsequent council term. In favor.
Just one sentence, any resulting recommendations.
Just the final sentence? Okay.
Yeah. Final.
Okay, just to clarify. In favor of removing that sentence? Opposed? Okay. So we are split on that. So, formal amendment to your motion? Are you okay to? 5-4? Yeah.
I missed what you said. I'm sorry. You're very low. And I don't know.
I'm sorry.
You are very quiet.
Let's try this. Is that better?
Thank
Okay. I'm trying. Sure. Okay, Councillor Holland, would you like to make an amendment to your motion so that there's a formal vote on that for the record? Okay. Before we get to the point of voting, are there any further recommended amendments to this policy? Seeing none? Okay. Councillor Holland has made a motion to forward policy 2009 elected officials remuneration and expenses to the upcoming regular county council meeting for approval as amended. And further, that the new policy to recommend that the new policy take effect on October 1st, 2024. And further to that, she's made an amendment to her motion to amend the policy to remove the last sentence of section 6.3I, Roman numeral 3. Counselor Kapitanic.
I'd like to split the question and have the effective date be the split. I'd
Perfect.
like to then see how it goes and hopefully work with the recommended motion.
So we're gonna call 3 questions, but they're kind of all gonna wrap into one motion. 3. Counselor Cromwell?
Thank you. Maybe I'm not in my proper brain today, but why do we have to split the 6.3 II but not the rest?
We seem
When
fairly
we
uniform
have
in the
a
rest.
You can split.
I didn't hear any opposition to the other amendments.
okay,
Were you in opposition to some of the other amendments?
nope, just curious.
Oh, everybody seemed fairly unanimous on the other amendments that we were making. That one was the one that,
No problem. Thank you.
okay. Everybody, okay? Any further comments, questions before I start calling the question? No? Okay. Call the question on the amendment to amend the policy to remove the last sentence of section 6.3I, Roman numeral 3 from the policy, which states any resulting recommendations, if approved by council, would be effective as of the beginning of the subsequent council term. All in favor to remove that sentence. Under remuneration review. The last sentence of. All in favor. 5 opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, that motion is carried 5 to 4. On the adoption of the motion to forward policy 2009, elected officials remuneration and expenses to the upcoming regular county council meeting for approval. As amended. Call the question. All in favor. And opposed? Motion's carried 5 and 4. And on the adoption of the motion to recommend to county council that the amended policy 2009 elected officials remuneration and expenses policy take effect on October 1st, 2024. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed?
That's right. Opposed.
6 and 3. Okay.
I'd make a motion for the closed session.
Reeve Hall has made a motion to enter closed session at 1:49. Call the question. All in favor? Motion carried 9 and 0.